Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Today we're going to explore the hobbies of the Fab Four. They had their love of music and the heroes of music that they were inspired by, but did they share other common interests in the hobbies they had? I'm going to leave out the part about the Beatles and their car collection because I did a video on that already. So now we'll find out about their other hobbies. First up, John Lennon. When John was younger, his cousin gave him a stamp book for his birthday, and John did the collection for a few years. John's cousin was Stanley Parks, and here's what he had to say about the stamp album. John and I grew up together and were very, very close to one another. In fact, he was just like a little brother to me. In fact, I passed on to him such things as my 300 dinky toy cars and my Meccano sets, in which they were made by the very famous Liverpool toy manufacturing company and Meccano set makers. Their products are all on show at a Liverpool museum on Albert Docks, where the Beatles City Cavern have their tourist attraction about the Beatles, etc. When I read recently his stamp album had gone for some amazing price to some collector, I thought to myself, I bet that's my stamp album that I gave to John, for at the time it has not been reported that my name was on the front cover of it. I got him interested in stamp collecting, and he would carry on collecting stamps himself after I gave him my stamp album, especially as Aunt Mimi corresponded with our large amount of relatives in New Zealand. Stamp collecting was very good for improving one's geography lessons at school. According to mentalfloss.com, during his Beatle days, Lennon was a devout Monopoly player. And this is the next hobby he had. He had his own Monopoly set and often played in his hotel room or on planes. He liked to stand up when he threw the dice, and he was crazy about the property's boardwalk and Park Place. He didn't even care if he lost the game as long as he had Boardwalk and Park Place in his possession. I don't know if you could say this was a hobby, but John Lennon had a great love for cats, and he had a few dogs, but cats held a special place in his heart. Later on, Lennon became a cooking enthusiast, and he often made lunches for his entire staff. When he was 37, Lennon wrote and drew an entire magazine titled Speed and Sport Illustrated, which included portraits of soccer players, cartoon strips, and an adventure story. John Lennon's love for writing and painting and drawing started when he was a boy, and as a child, Lennon preferred receiving paint boxes, pencils, and paper than toys. Lennon was a visual artist before he picked up his first guitar or wrote his first song. He attended the prestigious Liverpool Art Institute from 1957 to 1960. He continued to draw throughout his life. Lennon's primary medium was line drawing, either in pen, pencil, or Japanese sumi ink. John Lennon used to draw cartoons that were published in the school's magazine called The Daily How. So that's quite interesting. I didn't know that. And John Lennon, of course, loved musical instruments. His mom taught him banjo chords to play on his guitar, and he played the harmonica. And one day, he was playing the harmonica on the bus, and the driver was so impressed he took John to the depot and gave him a harmonica that was unclaimed. He not only played the harmonica, but different types of guitars and the piano, too. John Lennon was a reader, and he started reading books in his aunt's library in order to find someone he could relate to. Some of the books he read was Little Women, Alice in Wonderland, The Complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe, the major works of Alfred Lord Tennyson, the major works of Jonathan Swift, and the writings and drawings of James Thurber, among many more books. And also, John and Yoko had a love for TV. Lennon and Yoko also talked about their love of television, and she said, "We don't go to India anymore. We don't have to go anywhere." It's neat to see that what John was interested in during his lifetime and how it shaped him as a person and as a musical artist. Next up is Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney was interested in the visual arts in his younger years, but really didn't try painting himself until he went to a Wilhelm de Kooning's Long Island studio in the early 1980s. In 1999, he exhibited his works in a German gallery where he had painted portraits of David Bowie and John Lennon. This is a rather weird hobby that he has now. Paul likes to go through people's trash and see if he can find anything useful. He found a cupboard and thought he could use the wood, and he found a pillowcase and a sponge and now uses it to clean his sailboat. I guess Paul is resourceful and thrifty. We know Paul has a great love of music, and it's Paul's father, Jim, that encouraged him. He told him to play multiple musical instruments, and McCartney began his love affair with music at an early age. Though he took formal music lessons as a boy, the future star preferred to learn by ear, teaching himself the Spanish guitar, trumpet, and piano. Paul is a bird watcher, too, and it started when he was a kid. Speaking in 2008, he said, "I've always liked birds. It's a theme of mine. I think they're symbolic of freedom, of flying away. As a kid, I was a keen ornithologist and had a little pocketbook, the Observer's Book of Birds. I lived on the outskirts of Liverpool and could walk just a mile to the quite deep countryside." The 4 or 5 seconds hitmaker revealed that he's highly superstitious when it comes to magpies, and that he's very inspired by the black and white feathered creatures, which many see as an annoyance. He said, "Living in the country, I see a lot of them. You see one and you spit and salute. I happen to spit. I love it when you see 2 for joy." He said, "I don't shoot or catch them like a lot of people. They're not supposed to be good for other songbirds, and a lot of keen gardeners don't like them, but I do. I got lots. To me, it's a double joy or a triple joy. I'm very inspired on a spring morning if I see a crowd of 8. Paul also has a love of horseback riding, and he started doing that when he met Linda Eastman. It's neat to find out that about Paul and his surprising love for sorting through trash, and they say that one man's trash is another man's treasure, and Paul proved this statement's true, and he also has the love of animals in his bird watching and horseback riding, and also the love of music by learning various instruments. I guess he inherited his father's musical genes, which the world is grateful he has. Next we have Ringo Starr. Ringo is very hard to find out information about. I do know that when the Beatles became famous, Ringo started to get into photography, and he took plenty of pictures during the Beatle heyday. He released a few books on his photos. One is Photograph, and the others are Another Day in the Life and Lifted. It's interesting to look in the world of Ringo through his camera lens. And also, everybody knows how Ringo is obsessed by drums. He started loving drums when he was hospitalized as a teenager. He then turned that love into a profession and made a career out of being a drummer. And now he has drums in his home, and he goes out to tour when he can to continue his love affair with the drumskins. Last on our list is George Harrison. Well, we know George loved gardening, and it's a good thing he did because his property was massive. So there was always something to do out there in his property, that's for sure. George also had a love for Formula One racing back in the 70s and 80s. Before the Beatles became famous, he went to a racetrack near his family home. And when the Beatles became famous, George had no time to go to the racetrack. So the 70s and the 80s found George with more time to attend racing. George also had a love of guitars that started when he was a boy. He would draw pictures of guitars instead of paying attention to what was being taught in class. George got his first guitar when he was 13. His dad was trying to cheer him up and when he had to go to the hospital for a minor kidney problem. George would later describe the guitar. It was a Dutch Egmont flat-top acoustic guitar. As a cheapo, horrible little guitar, it had a selling price of £3 or $4. This was a large sum for a poorly paid bus driver, though it would prove an inspired long-term investment. In 2003, it sold for $800,000 at auction. Wow. I think George would be amused by that. His mother, Louise, saw that George was struggling, trying to learn the guitar. George tried to teach himself, but he wasn't making much headway. "I'll never learn this," he used to say, and I said, "You will, son, you will. Just keep at it." So it's a good thing his mother was so encouraging because that made him keep on trying, and now look what happened to him. He became so famous for his guitar playing and songwriting. George never gave up with his music. With much practice later, he was able to join up with the Beatles. George also had a love for film and became a movie producer for a while. Back in 1973, Peter Sellers introduced George Harrison to Dennis O'Brien, with whom he created the film production and distribution company called Handmade Films. According to rockandrollgarage.com, George Harrison even appeared in one of the most famous movies he produced, Monty Python's Life of Brian. He financed the movie by mortgaging his home, action that Python's Eric Idle later called the most anybody's ever paid for a cinema ticket in history. So after many box office bombs in the late 1980s and the excessive debt incurred by O'Brien, which was guaranteed by George Harrison, Harrison's handmade financial situation was really bad. The company ceased operations in 1991 and was sold 3 years later to Paragon Entertainment, a Canadian corporation. After that, George Harrison sued O'Brien for $25 million for fraud and negligence, resulting in an $11.6 million judgment in 1996. So at least he got some money back, but I know he was probably upset with that guy. I wish I could have found out even more details about the Beatle hobbies. What I did learn today was pretty interesting, though. I hope you liked the video. If you did, if you could get a thumbs up, that would be great. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, if you could do that, it would be wonderful. I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for another episode of The Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.